Hey, I'm Jordan McGilvery. I'm a senior at Duke University, and today we're going to be doing another baking video. Can I just redo that? So today what we have is a flatbread that's from India and East Africa called Chapati. This type of bread is going to be an unleavened flatbread that is typically used to just accompany a meal, like a curry or a stew is used to mop up the sauce, or to otherwise just get all that delicious kind of main course of the meal off of the plate and into your mouth. Because chapati is a bread, it's going to use kind of your standard bread ingredients, which are flour, water, and salt, but it's unleavened, so it's not going to use yeast. So the ingredients we're going to have today are pretty simple. We're going to have about 1 cup of all-purpose flour, another cup of whole wheat flour, 2 tablespoons of oil, usually a neutral tasting oil would be best, like canola, about 3/4 of a cup of water, but we'll get into the specifics of that later. Just 3/4 of a cup warm water, and about 1 teaspoon of salt. All right, so now we're gonna start mixing together the dough. I'm gonna start with 60 grams, which is equivalent to half a cup of flour. And then we'll go with the whole wheats. Next up, we're going to have our salt. And whenever you're mixing flours and dry ingredients together, it's a good rule of thumb to mix them together very well first before you put in the wet ingredients, just to make sure everything's thoroughly incorporated. Nobody wants to bite into chapati that has a chunk of salt in it, so that's why you really want to make sure everything's super well combined. And then once that's done, you can start adding your wet ingredients. For the wet ingredients for this type of bread, we're not going to be super exact. The goal is really just to get some hydration into the dough so that it's not dry at the end, which is why we're using oil. So if you guys remember from our bagel video, we didn't use oil, but it's very necessary for this type of bread because it prevents it from being dry. Oil, when you're baking anything, is a good ingredient because it coats and hydrates the molecules of starch that are in your dough. So when it coats these flour molecules, it prevents the gluten network from kind of forming too much in things like banana bread or other kind of pastries. But in this dough, what it's going to do is it's going to really just help get that hydration throughout the dough so it doesn't dry out and become brittle and hard. And now I'm going to add some water. I'm not going to add all of my water right now. This is why before I said it's not going to be exactly 3/4 of a cup. You want to just add about 3/4 of the water you do have in, and then you're going to mix the dough and see what it looks like afterwards. So I'm just going to add a little bit of my water, and then I'm going to start mixing it together. When you're mixing this dough, you're going to want to be really gentle with your fingers at first, or whatever tool you're using to mix. So just gently kind of get in there and work to get everything hydrated. You just want to try to get the moisture spread around as much as possible, get as much of the flour hydrated as you can, and then we'll start kind of being more firm with it and pressing it and kneading it and stuff. And after extensive Google research on how to best make this type of bread, I found that you want a dough that's not sticky, but you want it to be soft. So you don't want it to be too hydrated. You can always add more water later, so just add it slowly at first and then go from there. Okay, so now I'm gonna start kneading this dough. Gonna try to develop those gluten molecules and get this dough nice and ready for rolling. So again, I'm gonna press it, turn it 90 degrees, fold it over itself, press down, turn 90 degrees, fold over and press down. Hopefully after about 3 to 4 minutes, this dough is going to start looking a little less craggly and a lot more smooth. The reason that kind of you have to add the water slowly, and I can't give you a definite measurement, is every type of flour is a little bit different in the composition, whether it has a little more protein or just a little more starch. Whole wheat flour absorbs more liquid than all-purpose flour does. And also it depends on kind of your elevation. If you're cooking in, let's say, Denver, I've heard that you can have a lot of trouble with baking in general just because just of a lot of
chemistry and a lot of changes that happen at a high altitude. So kind of the humidity of your
kitchen, the altitude which you're at, the type of flour, the temperature of the water. There's so many variables that go into making a dough that you can't ever control for them all, so you kind of just have to play it by ear. Just a good thing to keep in mind. Baking is an exact science, but unless you're in a lab, you can't control all of the variables all the time. So you kind of just have to be careful and take it slow. All right, this dough is looking pretty good right now. Maybe just 30 more seconds of kneading and it will be about ready. And then we'll go on to making our little chapati balls. The more you work with bread, the more you'll get a feel for when the dough is ready. You don't want it to be tough, but you want it to have a smooth surface. So I'm gonna just finish up with this dough here and then I'll show you guys. So if you look at this dough, you can see that it's got a nice like smooth sheen to it. It's not super craggly like it was before, and it's all together in one cohesive ball. And that just shows you that the gluten network has formed and has created a structure that is enveloping the dough. And this is what makes bread kind of chewy and makes it so it doesn't just fall apart in your mouth like a cracker. So this dough is ready, nice and smooth. So we're going to just divide it up into smaller portions. So to do this, I've got my trusty bench scraper. These are very useful if you don't have one, look into getting one. It's good for dough, but also just sweeping up anything that you have, like vegetables you cut or just cleaning up your counter. It's just a really good tool. So I'm gonna divide this into 4 pieces. Depending on how big you like your chapati, you can do it bigger or smaller. After we shape these into balls, we're gonna let them rest for about 30 to 45 minutes. And this is very important. You wanna make sure to rest this dough after you roll it into balls, because if you don't, the gluten is not going to be relaxed. So when you roll out the chapatis, it's gonna become more like a cracker than it is like a bread. Because the tighter the gluten network is, the more structure the bread's going to have. And then when you apply heat to a bread with strong gluten structure, it kind of freezes the bread in that shape. So if you imagine a flat piece of bread that's really stiff, that's exactly what these are going to be like if you don't rest them. So 30 to 45 minutes, ideally. This is a very important step, so don't skip it. Make sure to rest them. I found a couple different ways to roll these out. I don't know what is exactly traditional, so I am sorry if this is not the correct way to do it, but I think some of the methods I found I'm gonna try out, and we're just gonna see what works best to make the softest chapatis. So to start, I'm gonna take this ball and I'm gonna flatten it, and then I'm going to just start rolling it out with my rolling pin. Ideally, if I had a smaller rolling pin, I would use that, but since I don't, this is the best we got. So I'm just gonna roll it in one direction, forward and back, and turn it, and then forward and back, turn it again. So I'm turning it about 30 degrees each time. So forward and back, turn it, forward and back, turn it, and we're gonna roll them out to about I'd say it's like 1/8 of an inch thick, about. So we'll see how that works. I'll roll out a couple that are thinner and a couple that are thicker, just so we can see what works better. So for this second ball of dough, I'm gonna try another method that I found that may or may not be from East Africa, so it may be kind of more of an East African strain, but it's a method to kind of make the bread a little more moist. So what I was told is you can roll out the ball of dough into a long, thin strip, or a long cylinder. Once it's in kind of a long, thin coil, we can kind of implement a little bit more of the layering process, but instead of just having a flat disc, we're going to put some oil on our hands and we're gonna just rub down this cylinder of dough. This method kind of just incorporates more oil into the finished product. So it'll kind of make it a little chewier, hopefully a little moister, and a little bit more oily as well. So we'll just see which one we like best flavor-wise. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and roll this up into a ball. So I'm gonna roll it up nice and tight here. And now that we have this, I'm gonna roll it out. With any kind of flatbread, fats are gonna be critical to making it supple and chewy, just because there's so little density that the heat is gonna easily dry out whatever dough you have if it doesn't have much fat. So if you're making these, definitely don't skimp on the oil because no one wants to be eating a dry cracker like flatbread. You would just eat a cracker if you wanted that. All right, so now we're going to just cook these chapatis. So a lot of flatbreads like chapati or tortillas are not actually baked in the oven. They're baked on just a hot surface. This could be like a grill or a griddle. Today we're gonna be using a hot cast iron pan. But this is where we get into one of the distinctions between your traditional roti and a chapati. So chapatis are usually baked on a griddle, whereas rotis are usually baked in a tandoor oven, which is charcoal fired, and it gets really, really hot. It's kind of just like a really large clay structure. But most people don't have a tandoor oven, so I'm just gonna be using a really hot cast iron pan, which is more similar to a griddle. So that's why I'll be calling these chapati today and not roti. So we're just gonna start with our first chapati that we rolled out, and I'm just gonna go ahead and go over to the stove and we'll go ahead and cook this guy. So we're gonna go ahead and cook this now. Very important, whatever cooking surface you're using for these has to be very, very hot. Medium high to high heat. It's gonna be critical to get it hot so that the chapati cooks fast without getting too dry. So you want the heat to really hit it and start to sizzle and have it start to bubble as soon as you put it on your cooking surface. So without further ado, we'll give it a try here. There we go, got a nice sizzle. And as you can see, it starts bubbling up just a little bit in the center here. And we're gonna start by cooking it about 30 seconds on this first side. All right, now we're gonna flip this over. Whew. Charred a little bit, so I'm gonna turn the heat down slightly. And then I'm gonna check it a little longer, and it's about done. So I'm just gonna take it off the heat and put it on a plate. All right, so here's our first chapati done, and get to cooking the rest of them. But we have our, what are these? Chapatis, we have our chapatis here, sorry. Took a little break to make some hummus, so I'm gonna eat that with these chapatis.
Yes, sir.
Andy's plate is the one with oil, mine is the one without. So we're just gonna go ahead and try these. I'm gonna rip this one in half so he can try both.
I as well.
And then we'll just compare them, see if there's a difference, see if they're good.
So this is the one that you just gave me, without oil?
Yeah, kind of more plain. All
okay.
Right. Plain first and then hummus later.
All right, plain first. We just bread shears as if coronavirus doesn't exist.
Breaking rules, don't do it. The edges are a little drier, but it's all right. But I do think it's pretty rich. Like in the center, I don't know, it's got pretty good flavor, pretty good balance of salt. What do you think?
I think it has a lot of the characteristics of like a tasty cracker, but in a soft form. It's almost like lavash, like the type of bread that we use for communion sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely like, it's good. It probably tastes better with hummus though.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it with hummus. Definitely the main point of these types of breads is to eat them with something like some kind of sauce or some kind of curry. They're meant to like be a salty eating vessel to get this into your mouth, so.
Ooh, that's good. You know, I'm not gonna lie, when I came into this, my expectation was that it was gonna be a little bit more risen. But now I think about it, that doesn't make any sense at all because we had no yeast at all or any sort of baking soda. I think what I was thinking about was like the kind of like naan that you get in like Trader Joe's or like those supermarkets.
See, naan has yeast, that's the thing. So I really wanna make naan, we'll do it in another video, but naan has yeast and it's just flatter because you deflate it first before you griddle it. But naan has yeast and it has like dairy in the dough that makes it softer and chewier. So I definitely prefer naan to this, but this is a lot easier to make. Takes less time. But yeah.
It tastes good.
Even flatbread can have yeast. Little did you know.
As a caveat. Okay, so what's this bread?
This one is the first one I wrapped up with the oil. So I put the oil on and rolled it up. So we'll see if it tastes any richer or any moister. Yeah.
All right.
All right. I don't think there's enough oil to make a big difference, but there is a slight difference.
I think flavor-wise, it's a little bit different. Texture-wise, not so much. Flavor-wise, it kind of has like that sort of like pancakey taste because there is more oil in it, I guess. I personally like this more, I think.
Yeah, I think texture-wise, for paratha especially, which is the other type of Indian flatbread I mentioned, you just make multiple layers of dough and I think ghee and more dough. So the more layers of dough and fat you have, the flakier it's gonna be and the more different the texture is gonna be, so.
Amen. So how do we end this?
Stay safe, get back to school safe, don't do anything dumb.